So some more disappointing news from Democracy Now. Aaron Mate tweeted this out, this video, and see if you can pick up on the irony or the contradiction.
The Odessa National Academic Theater Orchestra performing the Ukrainian national anthem during an outdoor concert this weekend called Free Sky, calling for peace and a no-fly zone. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report.
So I don't know if you caught it. Did you catch what she said? She said there, that's the Odessa. Now, that was the scene of a slaughter of Jews in the 40s, in the early 40s, and also recently Nazis and extreme right-wingers burned people alive inside of a union hall. And when they tried to jump out, they beat them. So that's where Odessa is, and their Odessa choir is singing for free skies, meaning they want a no-fly zone. She said they're singing for peace and a no-fly zone. Now, what's the problem with that, Aaron?
If you want peace, then you cannot also be for a no-fly zone, because a no-fly zone also means World War III, and World War III is unfortunately not conducive with peace.
So when they say a no-fly zone, what they mean is let's start shooting down Russian planes, which that's not call for peace. That's the opposite of a call for peace. That's a call for war. We want peace, but how we get there? You got to go through some war. You got to start shooting some shit down, right? So peace after we shoot some shit down. And of course, Democracy Now! Repeats it. Isn't that kind of heartbreaking?
Well, it is heartbreaking. You know, I worked there for 10 years, so there's plenty of heartbreak for me when it comes to that direction the show is taken. Now, look, I'm sure what happened here was a producer who doesn't realize what a no-fly zone is just wrote that down and put it in a teleprompter, and that's what Amy was reading. I don't think Amy actually advocates a no-fly zone, but the fact that this was made it to air, it's just funny. It's just such a funny contradiction.
Well,
and of course, it wasn't corrected either.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Not that I don't know if she endorses a no-fly zone or not.
No, she doesn't.
But the fact that she wouldn't correct that, she wouldn't point out the ridiculousness of them singing for peace and for a no-fly zone is a letdown, that to say the least. So now people watching that aren't getting they're being propagandized.
Yeah. Look, to me, and I'm biased because I used to work there, and before I worked there, I was such a big fan of it. But to me, Democracy Now! Used to represent the best that U.S. media could be, and that it would constantly expose the manufacturing of consent. Now, on some key issues, not all of them, but on some key issues, it actually is representative of manufacturing consent because it toes the line. It toes the party line, and it does not cross the sound barrier on issues that it used to actually expose. Instead of challenging propaganda, it often parrots it. And I haven't seen everything it's done about Ukraine, but what I'm told is that there's been basically almost no or even no mention of all these key issues that are crucial to understanding the war in Ukraine. So, for example, the very fact that this war did not begin with Russia invading, that there's been a war in the Donbass for 8 years of Ukraine with 14,000 people dead. And the U.S. has played a major role in that, shipping weapons, blocking diplomacy. That has not gone covered on Democracy Now! From what I'm told. Also, the dismantling of arms control treaties for the last 20 years, which has further encircled Russia, put U.S. weapon systems inside Poland and Romania. And of course, most critically, and this is something that you're not allowed to mention in U.S. media, is the coup of 2014, which we used to cover back on Democracy Now! When I was there, and did, I think, in such an effective way with guests like Stephen Cohen, who later on was banned from appearing on Democracy Now! But so all this critical context is not being given. And the only way you're allowed to be critical now or question the war in Ukraine is, was it a good idea or not to expand NATO? And yeah, that's an important question to explore. But the issue is so much more than just NATO. It's also about a war in the Donbass region of Ukraine that we've been fueling for 8 years with billions of dollars worth of weapons, and we're continuing to fuel now.
Here's what Glenn Greenwald said. He said, even with the utter collapse of Democracy Now! Into MSNBC neoliberalism, this is the funniest thing I've seen in a while. That is pretty. It was sadly funny. I don't know. That's big balls for Glenn to say that, because they did freeze him out because he was right about Russiagate, and Democracy Now! Manufactured consent for Russiagate, which is actually manufacturing consent for this war right now. So Democracy Now! Is really really doing horrible work. So they brought him back on recently to talk about Edward Snowden, I think. And
well, no, what happened was that was a panel discussion that was like an outside event for a different organization.
Oh, is that what that was?
Re-aired on DN, yeah.
Oh, so he wasn't actually invited on DN.
Yeah.
So even when he came out with his latest book, even after all the great work he did, they still won't, getting Lula out of prison, they still won't bring him back on. And you tell me why that is. You tell me what the F is going on over with Democracy Now! You tell me what's wrong with that. What happened?
I'm not there, so I don't know. What I do know is that they've made some terrible editorial decisions on Russiagate. On Syria, they decided to be all of a sudden a pro-dirty war outlet, essentially, freezing out any dissenting voice, to the point where in the last appearance on their show, and this is something I'm really is a serious issue for me, because he was so important to my intellectual development, and I met him through Democracy Now!, and that's Stephen F. Cohen, the late eminent scholar of Russia studies, Princeton, NYU, changed the field of Russian studies. And back in 2014, when the coup happened in Ukraine, while the entire media was manufacturing consent for the Obama-Biden policy of backing a coup in Ukraine and fueling a proxy war, Stephen F. Cohen would come on Democracy Now! And just masterfully correct the record. And his last appearance on DN, so that's where I met him. And we kept in touch over the years. And then when I went on to The Real News, I interviewed him there. And when I went into the Gray Zone, he would still come on. But meanwhile, his last appearance on DN was in April 2017, when he criticized the dirty war on Syria. And after that, for the last 3 years of his life, 3+ years of his life, he was never invited back once. So they froze out the top Russia expert in the US, and the person who gave them a lot of credibility for so many years when they were covering Ukraine and Russia. I mean, he was the go-to voice, and he was a voice of sanity. And because he was a voice of sanity on Syria and Russia and Ukraine, because they made an editorial turn, he was frozen out. And that speaks to how powerful our propaganda system was, that because he was demonized and called a Putin apologist and all this stuff, even a top progressive news show that is supposed to be about breaking the sound barrier sold him out too. And that's just a tragedy.
Yeah, the whole Democracy Now! Is a big tragedy. Amy Goodman, and we used to be on the same radio station, KPFK, and they all turned into a bunch of crazy Russiagators, except for a few people. I was one of them, and she led the charge, right? So Pacifica Radio takes their cue from Amy Goodman, and Amy Goodman was giving them shit cues. Her cue was to be just like Rachel Maddow and the military-industrial complex narrative, and start another Cold War with Russia, which is leading to a hot war, and still won't tell the truth about Syria. Won't tell. It's just the fact that they aren't embarrassed to all get out that they're being outdone by a pothead comedian in his garage, and that I can at any moment can point to Mike's coverage of Syria as being way better than theirs. They should be humiliated, but of course they're not, because somewhere this has got to do with money. Somewhere this isn't Amy Goodman getting it wrong. She's not stupid. This is some kind of corruption somewhere happening. And I'd like to know what it is. You don't think it is, Aaron? You just think so? You think she's dumb? I think that's more insulting. No, you think she's that dumb that she gets Syria wrong, that she doesn't bring on Glenn Greenwald to talk about Russiagate or Stephen F. Cohen, or she ices you out to talk about Syria because she's dumb?
We have this debate often, Jimmy. I know many people agree with you, but to me,
you think she's dumb?
No, I don't. No, of course not.
So you think she's smart, but she's dumb?
I think we have an incredibly powerful propaganda system in which people subconsciously or consciously get the message that if they go there on certain issues, they're going to be outcast. They're not going to be welcomed into the club. And that is very powerful on people. Look at how many people at The Intercept get it wrong, despite having all the money in the world and working at like an ad-free organization. So there's no advertising pressure. Still, everybody toes the party line, because some people, I think, are just more concerned with being accepted into mainstream circles and not being called names like we are. I mean, we're constantly called all the names in the world. And they subconsciously, I think, just don't want to be a part of that, and they want acceptance. So that's what I think it is. I've worked with many of the people who are still at DN, and they're not corrupt people. No, they're actually very principled. They're not.
I'm talking about Amy Goodman. I'm not talking about the other people. They follow her lead, just like Cenk Uygur. Everybody else except me at the Young Turks went along with Russiagate at the top of their lungs. You don't think anybody else was skeptical? Of course they were. But they weren't going to say anything because they didn't want to lose their job or rock the boat. I didn't give a shit, so I did. But so that's what I think. I don't think everybody at Democracy Now! Is corrupt and taking money. I'm saying there's something wrong with the head, Amy Goodman. There's something wrong with her, and there's something going on that she needs to explain. And the fact that she would ice you out, ice Glenn out, Stephen F. Cohen, and give unbelievable shit coverage and manufacture consent constantly needs to be explained.
I think she's made terrible editorial decisions, but I'm not going to call her corrupt. I just won't do that.
I'm saying it looks like corruption. I don't have any evidence. I'm saying what would be she's not dumb. So that's the whole point. I know she's way smarter. And her whole thing, Aaron, used to be that they didn't care who called them names. They told the truth about foreign policy. But all of a sudden she started caring. Like that's another thing that doesn't make sense. So logic is going, there's nothing logical to her getting this wrong.
People change. People listen to different people. You know, all sorts of things could be going on. And to me, it represents, it's so much more bigger than just, one person. It's a broader trend in this country that we've seen through Russiagate. We saw how consent was manufactured, and it got to a lot of people. They used the fear of Trump to launder Cold War chauvinism and militarism, and it worked. That's what Russiagate was. It was a scam. And some of us had the critical thinking skills to see through it. Some of us didn't.
Hey, we got more dates for our 2022 stand-up tour. We're going everywhere. We're going to Dallas, Houston, Florida. We're going to Omaha, Des Moines, Pittsburgh, Columbus, Ohio, and Los Angeles. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a link for all the tickets for all our shows.